Now it's time for today's perspective, and it is a nation that rose up and managed to overthrow its dictatorial president of 13 years. But amid the celebrations of the fall today of Bashar al-Assad a year ago in Syria, it remains a fractured nation, struggling still to find stability and the right route to recovery after years of war. Official celebrations are being held, notably in Damascus. We can show these images, in fact, as they prepare for those celebrations, but also elsewhere around the country. Well, with me now here on set is journalist and author, regular contributor to Libération newspaper and Radio France, and author of the book as well, Le Nom des Ombres, or in English, The Name of Shadows, Escaping from the Syrian Concentration Camp Hell. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us today on the programme. Let's talk first of all generally about the war. I mean, having reported on it so thoroughly, being there straight after the fall of Assad, what's your sentiment, if you like? What are your feelings on this first anniversary of the fall?
First anniversary? I clearly feel what happened during 1 year, like in terms of change in the country. First, as journalists, we can now enter Syria to cover it. It was something completely impossible the past years during the time of the regime of Assad. We feel like when we see those crowds and those protests in the street, that people are feeling that there is a change, but also so much challenges to transform a whole nation that just escaped from like 15 years of war and like more than 55 years of dictatorship. So the challenges in Syria are huge now, even 1 year after the fall of Assad.
Yeah, a lot of the violence still remains, doesn't it, particularly in some pockets of the country. And it's that, obviously, the regime in Damascus is trying to overcome.
Definitely, because, you know, like after the fall of a dictatorship, you still have a heritage of this dictatorship. And you can see that because, for example, if you look at the numbers of the Syrian Network for Human Rights, for example, we still have like thousands of people getting killed in Syria during this year or getting tortured in new prisons. Also because the new authorities are not the only entity controlling the territory. You still have like Kurdish groups or the Islamic states all over, let's say, across the country. So there is something that remains from this dictatorship, also in the trauma that every Syrians are sharing right now. But let's say that the scale of tyranny and barbarian is not the same than before. Something have clearly changed in Syria after 1 year.
And do you think that change is enough? I mean, the Western world, we saw the president with Donald Trump recently accepting Syria and trying to help to get it back on track?
For those powers, definitely not, because they are still asking for guarantees to the new authorities to have a concrete change in Syria. But this change will take years because you have so much transition to appear in Syria right now. You have a democratic transition to just be able to build democracy after half a century of dictatorship. So you have to rebuild a whole state and institutions. It will be very hard to have democratic process right now in Syria regarding the situation of the country. And you have also to ensure transitional justice for all Syrians. And when I mean transitional justice, I'm not just talking about to judge the criminals of the former regime, but to judge everyone who committed war crimes in Syria. And there are a lot of groups who are committed war crimes during the time of the war. So again, the challenges are huge for the country in terms of transition, and it will take decades.
Tell us what it was like being there as Assad fell.
Such a feeling. Something, you know, like when I arrived to Syria, I imagined the fall of a dictatorship in chaos. I maybe imagined like 1,000 of people in the streets and like crowds and everything. But when I arrived the first hours of the 8th of December 2024, I discovered silence first. People were hiding in their house because they believed it wasn't possible. Assad has left. They believed he will come back. And I remember I entered in this big palace of Assad. I entered the prison of Sednaya, for example, and all this concentrationary camp hell that was all across the country. And it was something, let's say, a very mixed feeling between the happiness of the end of a dictatorship, but also the fear and the horror of everything that we saw in the street this day.
And you mentioned the prisons. I mean, that's what you've spent the last year working on your book, which has just come out. Why did you decide that that was the area you wanted to concentrate on in the book?
It came, let's say, from frustration. When I entered Sednaya, I was working for Libération, my newspaper, and I discovered it was impossible for me to sum up everything I saw there. All the horrors I was seeing just in the building, and I had only quotes to offer to the people that had like a lifetime to say and to tell. So the book was the only medium helped me to give enough density, detail, and to articulate all those lives with history, with a quest for, let's say, words, just to find words that will be enough to describe what was a crime against humanity that happened in Syria during the past decades.
And we were talking just before we came on air, and you were saying you felt it was very important to try and get the book out as quickly as possible, to get all those comments and those eyewitness reports put down on paper.
Definitely, because you know what happened with memory when we let time passes. Like people with collective memory, they will get influenced by the memory of each other. Memory will become the object of national reconciliation, for example. So it was very important for me to catch this moment of freedom, to enter every prison I called, because also after the end of a dictatorship, every doors are open. I was able to enter any branch of the intelligence to read and find some papers to describe what was this dictatorship. And it was a moment of truth when I was talking to people. I really thought it will be so hard for them to give this part of their life and to describe what happened to them after like sometimes 15 years in the concentration camp hell. So it was something very important, and I did like tons of interviews, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and they are now in this book. And I hope this book is itself a piece of memory for the time of this regime.
I mean, it's horrific, isn't it? Re-watching some of those images that we saw at the time of people going into those prisons. I mean, UN estimates 100,000 Syrians disappeared between 2011 and 2024, many of them in those prisons.
Yeah, definitely. It's the numbers are sometimes unbelievable, and to be honest, we don't know really how much people really disappeared after like 50 years of dictatorship. We consider that it can be 500,000 of people that are still under mass graves, or that just disappeared from Palestinian refugees to Syrian citizens. So the reality is that transitional justice comes also with this huge research for truth, and the problem in Syria is that they don't have enough money capacities to be able to achieve this truth. And when we saw other countries, like even Lebanon, that, for example, in our country in Lebanon, we have like 2 mass graves that are still in the country. And after 20 years after the Syrian occupation, we are still not able to identify the bodies that are inside. The scale of destruction and disappearance in Syria are like crazy for a country that is completely destroyed and needs hundreds of billions of dollars to be rebuilt.
As we watch those images today, and we've been showing some of them live from Damascus already as the celebrations, if you like, start to get underway, what are your hopes? I mean, how much hope do you have that they have managed to turn the corner and this will continue? I mean, these images are pretty spectacular, aren't they? Thousands of people there on the street.
Those images are hope. You know, like people protested like 15 years ago and got to jail for this action of protesting. This sin will be impossible like a few years ago under the Assad regime. So this is a symbol of hope, definitely. And in general, when I see the action of the civil society in Syria, it's enough for me to get hope. I remember after the fall of Assad, I met with some prisoners. They were still sick and they were still in need of surgery, but they were gathering to create the first association of former prisoners to ask for their rights. And after 15 years of being jailed because they were protesting, they went back in the streets to protest. So let's say that the obstination of the Syrian people is a big source of hope for the whole country. And let's believe and let's hope that the new authorities will not perpetuate a new authoritarian regime, because the words of the revolution and the words of this crowd that we're seeing right now in Damascus is they are a voice asking for democracy, liberty and freedom across the country.
Good to end with a message of hope. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us today. Arthur Sarradin joining us here on France 24. Thanks very much.
Thank you.